Welcome to this Healthy Work Company session on building habits for good mental health. I'm Alison Wright-Reid and I run a company called Insperson, which specialises in helping organisations become good by doing good, to develop work, systems and cultures that allow their people to be healthy, creative and effective. And we help individuals to develop resilient routines. In this session, we're going to explore why habits are important. Consider habits that really don't work for you. Understand why it's so hard to give up a bad habit. Explore an easier approach to developing habits that will serve and protect you. And finally, get good at making habits. So, why are habits important? Habits are chunks of behaviour that we've done so often we can now run them without thinking. Whether it's switching on the lights, making coffee, or calling yourself stupid, habits are actions and thoughts that we do automatically. Action without thinking, thought without thinking. And habits are really important. They're important because we all have bad habits that damage our mental and physical health. Because we all have habits that become more harmful when we're stressed. And because life is not a fairy tale, our future is not going to appear in the ting of a magic wand. It is, instead, the compound result of everything that we do, and a lot of that everything is habit. So, what use are habits to us? Most of our thinking goes on in the prefrontal cortex, which is an enormous part of the brain, but it can only do one demanding thing at a time. If you make it do two things, it copes by swapping from one to the other, which makes it slow and sloppy. Even when the prefrontal cortex, the thought centre, if you like, is single tasking, it can easily take 8 seconds to make a single decision. That's slow. And it consumes a lot of energy. Although the brain accounts for only 1/50th of our weight, it clocks up about 1/5 of our energy consumption, and an awful lot of that is used by the thought centre. That all means that running all of our actions through the thought centre just isn't viable. We would never survive. In ancient conditions, we'd be too slow to catch our dinner or get out of the way of danger. In modern conditions, we would have to lie down to carry on a conversation. The fact that we don't have to is made possible because we outsource our routine thinking. Instead of occupying the overloaded and energy-hungry thought centre, little chains of behaviour are delegated to an ancient part of the brain called the basal ganglia. So while the thought centre is busy thinking, the basal ganglia allows us to move around, recognise opportunities and respond to the threats identified by its close neighbour, the amygdala, our threat centre. The basal ganglia, or habit centre, hardwires any repeated behaviour that produces a reward and is triggered by a particular cue. So you need that grouping: cue, behaviour, reward. The cue could be internal, like hunger, pain or anger, or it could be external, like a red traffic light or the biscuit tin or email notification. Because the habit centre is built for ancient conditions, where survival is about finding today's food, the habit centre values immediate rewards. It really does not care about tomorrow, let alone next year or 40 years hence. It also values guaranteed rewards far more highly than those which might be much greater, but possibly might not appear. And it pays a lot more attention to rewards than it does to punishments. Basically, your habit centre reckons that definitely getting a marshmallow now is a really good deal, much better deal than being able to afford a care home in 50 years' time. It reckons that enjoying a burst of speed is worth it because you won't necessarily get 8 points and a gigantic fine in a fortnight. The habit centre is so reward-focused that it has 10 times as many dopamine receptors as any other part of the brain. Why am I telling you this? Because your habits are driven by dopamine instead of the other happy chemicals. And it's important to understand why it undermines us, and it's important when you try to deceive it into creating new habits. Habits are useful because they allow us to be intelligent. We need habits so much that they make up about half of the things that we do every day. About half our actions, even half our thoughts are on autopilot. And those actions shape us. If you are kind to yourself, it lets you try, lets you fail, and lets you learn so that you can improve. If you're harsh on yourself, you give up in disgust and your life gets smaller. You smile, you get one set of thoughts and one set of wrinkles. You scowl as you peer at your computer, you get a different set of wrinkles, and you feel quite grumpy. If you want to shape your life, you want to shape your habits. You want to make regular, small improvements that build on one another, compound, and club together to change your life. Because if you don't do that, if you ignore the influence of your habits, they will walk all over you. My first challenge to you, and the first exercise on your action sheet, is what kind of future do you want to have? What kind of person do you want to become? And are your habits going to let it happen? Are you headed for a life of joy, or are you muddling through in a dopamine daze? Are you the director of your own life, or a non-speaking extra bossed about by habits? Habits liberate us, but they can also imprison us. They can keep us doing and thinking things that were maybe once okay, but they don't fit with the person that we've become, let alone the person that we want to be. If one of your habits is building a person that you would not love to become, then it's a bad habit. I'm not being judgmental. It's simply about you. What does or does not serve you? If a habit does not serve you, it's a bad habit, and you want rid of it. Most of us have at least a few. We will self-soothe with cake and alcohol or sweets. We'll entrance ourselves with shopping, surfing, binging. We'll be chaotic, disorganised, we'll procrastinate, we'll hide from challenges. What are your bad habits, and what are the cues that set them off? And why does our ancient brain do that to us? Why does it trot out behaviours that undermine us? It does that because it does not share our priorities. It is dopamine-driven, intent on immediate survival. It wants to make it easy for us to find food, shelter, safety. When we get those rewards, it remembers where we were, how we felt, what we did to get the rewards. When we find ourselves in the same situation, it trots out the same behaviour in the expectation of getting the same reward. And when we want a reward, it pulls out a behaviour that delivered that reward at some point in the past. The more the behaviour delivers, the more the habit centre uses it, and the more the habit centre associates it with the situation and the reward. Eventually, the behaviour becomes such a favourite that the habit centre doesn't even notice the actual reward. It's already doped up by the expectation of getting the reward. When a habit is thoroughly ingrained, the habit centre only needs to recognise the cue. It doesn't notice the reward, and it doesn't know that it is failing you. You're on the sofa, you're tired, you don't go up to bed because your habit centre drags out your early childhood learning that staying up late is a treat. Most of our bad habits are survival behaviour gone wrong, or really early lessons that don't apply to grown-ups. They might be right in some situations, but in our current life, they work against us. And the modern brain lets it happen because it's too busy to do everything. It has to delegate. We do have some control. There is a little part of the thought centre which can switch a habit on or turn it off, but it takes effort. I mean, how good are you at not scratching an itch? And we don't always have enough effort to spare. When we're faced with really heavy demand, or we're tired, or we're ill, our thought centre has no effort to spare, and it loses control of our habits. And when times are so tough that we feel threatened or deprived, remember the threat centre and the habit centre are right next to each other, our threat centre doesn't trust the slow, energy-greedy thought centre, and it shuts it out. It puts the ancient brain in charge. So when our threat centre and our habit centre are in charge, the habit centre digs deep, and it drags out its deepest, oldest, easiest habits, and it doesn't even notice when they fail. So the bad habits that got you stressed become even stronger when you are stressed, which makes you even more stressed. So in the action sheet, you'll find an exercise to help you identify bad habits that you would like to change. Why is it so hard to give up a bad habit? Why can't we just stop? Surely if we can just rustle up enough willpower, we can turn a habit off or even delete it. Well, sadly, our habit centre won't let us. It hoards habits. Our habit centre is convinced that every single one of its treasured collection could one day save our life, so it clings to them and it can't bear to throw anything out. But we can outwit it. We can be cunning. And our cunning has 3 or 4 options. The first one, which doesn't apply very often, is to confuse it. When you are in a very new environment, like a new house or a new job, you might find that that's possible at that point to delete a habit that you don't want. They're infrequent opportunities. So the main 3. First one, sort out your environment so you don't keep encountering the queue. Don't leave the biscuits and cakes sitting out on the work surface. Put them at the back of the cupboard and leave the fruit out. Put the television get it out of your bedroom. Fill your plate with food, but buy smaller plates. Explore your internal cues, your needs. Do you really need cake, or do you need compassion? Do you really need a drink, or do you need to express legitimate anger? Second main thing, pay attention to the reward. Are you actually getting what you think you're getting? Crisps, instead of scoffing them, eat them mindfully. Concentrate on the smell, texture, noise, taste, all the way through, every single one. How rewarding do you find them now? Extend that mindfulness to yourself and to your position. Are you relaxed, or are you tired, stiff, and desperate to go to bed? Pay attention to your feelings, and you'll be better able to tell your habit centre, no, this is not what I need. Finally, and oddly, you can actually record over the top of the action. Your habit centre keeps the cue and it keeps the reward, but it changes the bit in the middle. It's like changing your phone number or your address. So when you're desperate to scratch, sit on your hands. When you're bored and just want to browse eBay for a few minutes, try tidying up for the same few minutes and then get back to your work feeling satisfied, in control, and instead of being dazed. You can't delete a bad habit, well, not very often, but you can subvert it and make it work for you. You can turn it into a good habit. If you turn to the action sheet, you can start by perhaps thinking about your sleep habits. Now let's look at an easy approach to developing habits that will serve you and protect you. How you create new habits instead of changing old ones. You need an action which is bracketed by a reward and a cue. So something you get out of it and something that makes you do it. You've seen that the habit centre is driven by dopamine, and you might realise that healthy habits like a good diet, exercise, mindfulness, sleep, self-compassion don't necessarily deliver a dopamine hit. They might be giving you serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins. But you can trick your habit centre by making up a certain and immediate reward for the behaviour. It can be really tiny. You can high-five yourself. You can log it in an app. You can have a tiny treat. Experiment with rewards that work for you. And then we need a cue. Think about how often you want to do the action and whether there's anything you need in order to do it. Do you need to be in the kitchen or in gym gear? Then explore your day and find something you already do that fits the same pattern. When you found an existing habit with a pattern that matches what you broadly want to do, decide whether your new habit would fit before it, or after it, or alongside it. Your habit centre doesn't like breaking up a chain of behaviour. Just you try reciting your phone number from the middle. But it actually really likes tacking a new behaviour onto the beginning or the end. And it's also happy enough to twin a new behaviour alongside an existing one, like maybe doing lunges while you brush your teeth. Then we need to think about behaviour. What exactly will you do? What will you need? And what's in it for you? In addition to your made-up dopamine reward, what kind of person is it helping you to become? You'll need that for long-term motivation. Once you've described the behaviour, go back and describe the very tiniest first step. I'll give you an example. When I'm working from home, despite the fact that I go out for a run and go to the gym, it's too easy to get stuck inside for long periods, and I might not go to the gym until the evening. Every day I want to go out and, unless the weather's absolutely mad, have a wander around, get out and feel nature. So I decide that when I have my first cup of coffee, that's my cue, in my hands, I will open the back door and poke my head out. And that's the only thing I commit to. On most days, I'll actually do more, and I'll go and wander around and be mindful and feel the air in my face and smell the coffee and look up at the sky and listen to the wildlife. When I go to the gym, I get dressed in gym gear and it nags me until I go. So what action do you want to take, and what is the very tiniest first step? So that's the reward, the cue and the action. To turn it into a habit, you need to start doing it. Well, you're starting small, so why not start now? Then you need to repeat it until it feels weird when you don't. How long that takes depends on how easy the cue is and how easy the action is. So make it simple to make it sticky. Use an existing cue, keep the action small, congratulate yourself. And it's also easier to succeed when you prepare for failure. Sounds a bit negative, but you will fail. We all do. You'll forget, you'll feel awful, you'll even want to rebel some days. The key to success is to be nice to yourself and keep your failures small. And think, maybe the habit doesn't fit into some days. Can you come up with a slightly different version of it? Maybe the reward needs to be different or stronger. Maybe you're expecting too much. You didn't have your first driving lesson in the morning and then take a McLaren around Brands Hatch in the afternoon. So be reasonable with yourself. Recognise the improvements you've made. Be pleased that you're becoming someone that you would love to be. Be that person in your mind and tell yourself out loud, I am a person who blah, blah, blah. Once you've started with an old habit and maybe one new one, after a couple of weeks, if you're happy, you might add another habit. We're looking for sustainable change, so don't fall victim to the new year, new you fallacy. We're not looking for big dramatic change, we're not looking for lots of change, but gradually start introducing new habits. Because as you subvert bad habits and build new habits, you'll actually build a habit of being good at making habits. As partly because you're training your brain, and partly because you're getting in tune with your needs and your rewards. Once you have a few habits under your belt, I suggest you consider some multiplier habits. These are habits that deliver much more than you'd expect by boosting your energy and mood or lifting you out of automatic so you can get back in control. What you do and when you do it will need to suit your circumstances and your personal body clock. I've already suggested sleep. For me, that's a huge one. Some of my other favourites are I am a person who blah, blah, blah. A cold shower. I know, but it works. Exercising first thing before the excuses rack up. Eating the biggest frog first. Getting around and moving and smiling and doing a 2-minute task every half hour. Keeping a gratitude log and starting tomorrow today. You'll find more information in the action sheets. You'll find more ideas about resilient routines on Insperson's website. And that's the end of our session. So, habits for health. You can change your life. Go get started.